We are often driven by a paradigm that says fear, lack, limitation, and it becomes a worldview. If I believe the world is ultimately a dangerous place, then when I see you on the street, I'm going to be a little suspicious. But if I accept that there is something bigger and broader and more loving behind this matrix of existence, then I'm going to be more open and accepting of you. Do well at what you're doing. Focus on what you want, but don't get attached to it. Just focus on what you want without attachment, and the universe starts maneuvering to make these things come together. It's ultimately on each of us to make a decision on which way we want to go, because we are the creators of this reality.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for joining me on Success Matters podcast. You have had quite a varied career and you spent a very long time in the military. When we prepared for this call, you had said to me you had wanted to set the world on fire. So what was that journey for you from your, I suppose, 20s when you wanted to set the world on fire to where you are now?
Yes. Well, Sanjay, thanks for having me. I really appreciate spending this time with you. So like we had talked before, when I was young, I had envisioned now school age of thinking serve in the military. My father had served in the U.S. Air Force, and I thought, okay, I've got to do my duty. Some uncles had served even in World War II. Mm-hmm. And I thought about maybe the military academies, that sort of thing. But when I was finishing high school, I'd been accepted to college, and I got this phone call. So I'm in high school, senior year of high school, a few months away from graduation. I get a phone call from a recruiter. And I expected to tell him I'm going to go to college, and I expected a hang up. Instead, he responded, "Have I got a deal for you?"
Right.
And the deal was joining the reserve. And you could go to college through the Reserve Officer Training Corps, get a commission as an officer, and join the reserve 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and that sort of thing. So I decided I would serve. As I went through college, I got my commission, stayed in the reserve. And I was coming out of college. I was going to light the world on fire. I had big dreams, lots of big ideas, and I was pursuing those. I had met a woman in college, and we got married after college, and she was teaching school with sort of the stable income. I thought, I've got all these projects, and some of them were really powerful things that were going to make a lot of money. And actually, if I look back now, there are about 6 ideas that were billionaire ideas.
Okay.
I was not able.
Examples.
Yeah. Well, one of them, so right out of college, so this was the 80s, the 1980s, I had put together a questionnaire about dating. So I was not married at this point, but it was a dating questionnaire. And I thought, if we could sort out our needs and interests better prior to meeting, we could maybe find better matches. So I put together this questionnaire and I started marketing it through the college, just put a little poster up and that sort of thing. And to me, it was the beginnings of what we now have as online dating once we get into the internet and all of that. But that was the seed of the idea, was sorting ourselves better and matches. And then through that questionnaire, we'd get people that were more like us that we might date, and then it would grow from there. But I sold a few of my questionnaires and that sort of thing, but I did not aggressively pursue it. So another idea was a health facility, a gym, what is now a gym, and you'd build gyms and then you'd franchise those and those would expand. Another one was a sports superstore, and that was where you could try out all the sports. So they have batting cages, they would have pitching machines, they would have golf simulators, they would have football, you could throw the football and all of these things all under one roof. And it would be a sports mega store where you'd both be able to get to experience the sports and buy the equipment and all of that. And they'd have sports teams and all that. So I had all these ideas that I was chasing. And then we had our first child.
Right.
Well, Lisa, my wife, was teaching school, was the stable income. And I thought, all right, we want her to be able to stay home to raise children. That means I got to get on the straight and narrow. So I'd stayed in the reserves. And so I decided to go on active duty with the Army. We looked at that. My wife had been a military brat, so she was familiar with the military lifestyle. And then the next 25 years was on active duty with the Army. And we used that time as really an opportunity to see the world on Uncle Sam's dime. So we went overseas. We had a tour in Europe. We saw different parts of the U.S. And I matured and grew in what I call an eclectic career in all different directions. But ultimately, I got to work on Capitol Hill as a congressional fellow. I was a congressional liaison. I worked as or served as a national security fellow at Harvard University, was working in general officer management, all of these things out of the Pentagon, where I got to see how, in common parlance, how the sausage is made at the Department of Defense, on Capitol Hill, and all of those kinds of things. So for me, it was a growth experience through those 25 years of active duty, already on top of what had been a fizzled entrepreneurial exercise, before I went on active duty with the Army. But then when it was time to retire, I thought, I've got to do something that makes an impact and a contribution. So I got involved in personal and professional development. And that's where I have been for about the last 10 or 12 years, is writing books, putting together educational programs, both online and in person, delivering those programs and helping people see a broader perspective. Now, your question about what does success mean? Back in 2008, I wrote a book called Promise and Potential. And in that book, how I defined success was moving in the right direction.
Okay.
Moving in the right direction. And by that, I mean life is a participatory sport. And so as long as we're moving, the purpose of life is to explore and experience, learn and grow, create and contribute. So for us, it's to express more life. And this idea of moving in the right direction is participating fully in your life, not holding yourself back with fear and lack and limitation, but moving. And if you're really moving, if you're authentically moving, the world will adjust to whatever direction you're going, and ultimately it will be the right direction.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you've jumped straight into what success means there, which is brilliant. As part of your military career, so based on what you were saying, how long were you in those more, I suppose, Capitol Hill based roles versus the being out in the field in active duty,
Yes.
Actually out in the field there?
When I joined the reserve, I figured I was only going to be in for one tour. For the time, it was an 8-year enlistment. I'd only be in that time in the reserve. And so I decided to join the infantry, which is the down in the dirt, soldier in the field kind of job in the Army, because I thought this is going to be temporary. I want to get the full experience. So I was in an infantry organization. And then when I went on active duty, they sent me to a recruiting assignment. Okay. So I had grown up in New England and in New Hampshire specifically. And then we moved to the middle part of the country in Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri. And I was in a recruiting assignment. So I was out of my infantry world and now in recruiting. Mm-hmm. When I left that, I went overseas into it was technically an infantry assignment, but was for a logistics organization. So now I'm moving away from the mainstream of infantry and into broader assignments. When I left Europe, now here's a little anecdote that I found interesting. When I got to Europe, I call my human resources guy. Everybody has a guy, the people that manage your career for assignments. And I said, this was in Kansas City. I said, hey, we want to go to Europe. And he said, don't call us. We'll call you. Everybody wants to go to Europe. It's not going to happen. Well, at the end of my recruiting tour, he calls me up and he says, hey, you still interested in going to Europe? And I said, yeah, we'd love to go to Europe. He said, well, there's a little bit of a catch. The Dayton Peace Accords had just been signed in 1995, and the U.S. was sending a multinational force into Bosnia. They needed some replacements. And if I was willing to go to Europe, I'd be going to Bosnia immediately. Okay. I said, I'll do that. So we went to Europe. The interesting thing was I moved there. And at that time now we had a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. So my wife moved, I moved. Within a week, I deployed to Bosnia, leaving my wife with 2 young children on her own in Germany. Wow. But being the military brat that she is, and her mom came over, she managed, she found a house, she did all that. When I got back from Bosnia, everything was settled in. So she's a champ. But here's the interesting thing. Now, leaving Europe, since I had done well in recruiting, they wanted me to come back to recruiting at a higher level. And so we were all set to do that. We had bought a house. We were going to Atlanta, Georgia. I get a call. And they said, hey, we've got a 3-star general in Texas. He's looking for an aide. Would you be willing to throw your name in for that? And I said, sure. our household goods, we're leaving Germany, our household goods, everything's getting shipped to Atlanta, Georgia. They had told me about this potential for a hire. I go on leave in New Hampshire with my family and my parents. I get this phone call from the 3-star general who's in San Antonio, Texas. He calls me up to do a telephone interview. Now, he grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up 30 minutes outside of Boston.
Okay.
So we connected. He said, how would you like to come to Texas? And I said, by all means, sir, I'll be there as soon as I can. Household goods and everything were going to Atlanta. Everything had to be changed. Off we go to San Antonio, Texas. Here's another little anecdote at San Antonio. In Texas, it is a primarily medical installation, Fort Sam Houston. And so on-post housing was an 18-month wait. Now, I was coming in as the 3-stars aide. So this is the highest ranking guy on the installation. So they had a house set for me. So here I slide into this house. It's this garrison 2-story, 4-bedroom with maid quarters house. All the doctors. So I had a cardiologist, an anesthesiologist, a veterinarian all around me. And they're there. Who the heck is this guy that comes in without the 18-month waiting list? And here he is. And I was a junior to most of them, but I was the aide to the 3-star general.
Right.
So that got me that housing. So then from that position, they called me to the Pentagon and I started working personnel kind of jobs, but then I applied to be a congressional fellow. So this was early 2000s. So in 2003, that calendar year from January to December, I was a congressional fellow working in the U.S. Senate for that year. Once you're in that world, then you tend to stay in what we called government affairs. So I was in government affairs, went on to some other assignments, but came back to government affairs. So essentially from 2003 till 2011, I was in and out primarily in that world.
So what made you stand out to get those calls to say, hey, do you want to do this?
Oh, this is the interesting thing. Okay, so all right, I don't want to sound okay. I always did well at my assignments, so I was good at what I did. But the interesting thing was, so I started and I thought to myself, I would like a position. So I'm looking in my future positions. I'd like a position where I'm with a senior person, mentor who can help me find my way. And all of a sudden, this 3-star position comes up. Here I am, the aide as a what we call the major, which is a middle rank for officers, to a 3-star general who's a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient.
Right.
So now, wait a minute, I just kind of thought getting to Europe I thought about it, and then I put it on the back burner and it manifested. I wanted a mentor who was a senior person who would guide me. All of a sudden that manifested. So it was this, do well at what you're doing, focus on what you want, but don't get attached to it. Just focus on what you want without attachment. And the universe starts maneuvering to make these things come together. And that's how these positions kind of stacked one after the other. I had done well in my European assignment, and when it came time to be selected for the Congressional Fellowship, ultimately it came down to a 2-star general to make the final selection, and he said, I want parity. And he didn't really know me. We'd only met a couple of times, but he said, this is the guy I want for the Congressional Fellowship. And then off I go on to Capitol Hill. So it was a series of serendipitous events. But if I look back on it, it was my intention without attachment. And then things just fell into place.
How vocal were you about your intention with people? Because sometimes people have these dreams, if you like, but they never share them. And others do share them. And so I'm interested to see, were you vocal about it, or were you like just thinking, oh, I hope it happens?
Yeah, for the most part, it was the latter, in that I this is where I'd like to go. So it wasn't, I didn't make a vision board or put this as my goal.
Right.
However, I thought about it. So the European one, as an example, I had to call my guy. I had to let him know I was interested in Europe. So I had to get at least in the record that, hey, Paradis, this guy's interested in going to Europe, so that when they needed somebody, they thought of me. So the pieces would all connect. As far as getting aligned with the 3-star, the Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, it was really, I had thought about that. I just thought about it for over a period of years. I thought, okay, it would be nice to be aligned with somebody who could show me the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it fell into place. So it wasn't a broadcast or a vision board or any of those things, or I'm, this is the absolute outcome that I have to have. It was, this is the direction I would like to go, sort of that moving in the right direction. And I'm going to keep doing what I can as best I can.
Mhm.
And things always work out.
Would you say your behaviors changed once you'd kind of made that thought in your mind that, oh, I want to do this, and therefore your body was kind of showing to everyone around you that you're capable of it, that you're able to do it without necessarily being overt about it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I always competence. I try to be competent. I try to do well at whatever I do.
Mhm.
I don't like giving it half measures. So I want to do well at whatever I do. And I think part of that bleeds over. So you see, hey, this is a guy who's always trying to do the best, is trying to excel at whatever he does. But I never attach specifically the goal with this is where I'm going to go from here. It was always these are my desires and I'm going to do the best I can where I am right now.
Mhm.
Just keep doing that and
Yeah.
keep thinking about where I want to go. But again, it's not an attachment. It's not an absolute. It's not my world's going to fall apart if that doesn't happen, because it could be something else that's just as good or better.
Right.
So just
Yeah.
keep moving. Just keep moving in that right direction.
And that, to that point, the moving in the right direction. So the analogy that I always use and tends to come up in my mind, because I do a lot of hiking, is you've got that hill or that mountain you want to climb up ahead, and you've got to map that path, right? And that path, maybe you need to change that path because it's muddy, it's rocky, it's whatever, and you're going to have to move it. But you've got a kind of sense of direction that you're heading in. That's basically what you're saying, right? Is you want to get to that point, and just keep on moving towards that point, step by step.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Hmm. So after that military career, you retired from the military. What did you start to do after that?
So I had written a book while I was on active duty called Promise and Potential. And then immediately after I retired, I started work on two books. So one was what I called Warriors, Diplomats, Heroes, which was really a Army focus. So what makes the Army tick? And the other one was Success 101. How do you succeed? And so I wrote both of those books, and then I started to put on online programs and workshops and that sort of thing together. So that kind of launched me into that personal and professional development area, where those first two books, and then since then, in total, I've written 11 books altogether.
Oh, wow. How do you find the time to write 11 books?
Well, for me, it was, it's an interesting question in that, because it's how you put the book together. So for me, it's how I put the book together. What I do is I think, okay, if I were to talk to somebody and I wanted to teach them about some principles or a subject matter, I think about how would I organize that in an actual presentation. And then from that, I outline what I want to put in the book. And then it's not like a curriculum of lessons plans, but it's anecdotes and stories and lessons in each chapter in the way I would teach it. So if
Okay.
you look at my nonfiction books, primarily they are like a teaching curriculum for whatever the subject matter is. I've done health and fitness, money focus, personal growth, success principles, that sort of thing.
Wow. Okay. So Success 101, it sounds like I should probably read that book as part of my Success Matters podcast. So what do you do today? I know you said you're developing a whole new kind of program.
Yes. So pivot isn't the right word, because this is sort of where circumstances have led me. So my focus today is, there is a lot of, let's say, angst and anxiety in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've been doing is taking a lot of time and effort to think through and look at what's going on and why. So I've captured that in an online course that I just published called What's Really Going On? Apocalypse or Evolution? What's really going on? Apocalypse or evolution? And I put that course on udemy.com and on YouTube and that sort of thing, but I just came out with it this summer. But the idea is that we are undergoing both well, it's more than both. So it's environmental upheaval, we have economic stratification, we have political polarization, we have technological disruption, and then, of course, everyone has their own personal challenges that they are experiencing. All of this together seems like a lot of chaos all coming together at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I do in what's really going on is sort out all that chaos because the chaos has a purpose. And that purpose is really to get us to step back from our ego and our arrogance and our self-righteousness to really evaluate what this life is about and force us to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
For 12,000 years, might makes right has been the organizing paradigm. 12,000 years we've been doing might makes right. And that always results in the many serving the few.
Mm-hmm.
We are at a transition point in our human history where we can transcend from might makes right to we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Move from that potential destruction, violence, competition, conquest into connection, collaboration, and creativity. A whole new way of being if we will allow it. And we each are being called to do that. And that's what all this chaos is all about. The chaos is stripping us down to, are we going to be primarily organizing ourselves and focus on fear and hate and violence and destruction? Or are we going to see that there is a bigger, a better way? And we have to each make that choice. So that's the focus of what I'm working on right now. As a component of that, and also as a fruit from my money work, I focus on what I call the money game.
Mm-hmm.
And the money game is a game we're all playing, but most people, they know they're playing the money game, but they really don't understand the rules or how the game's being played. Money itself is just a social construct. It's just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of us getting along. The two ways the game are played is primarily what we call the real economy is making. And that is where I connect, collaborate, and create real value and bring it to the marketplace. And we exchange that value. There is another way to play the game, however, and that's more in line with that idea of might makes right. And that's the taking game, where I can just impose, I compete, I deceit. And what I'm going to do is extract all I can from that game. And unfortunately, most people in the real world think they're operating in the real economy, which is a making game. And that is absolutely true and correct. And that's what most of us are trying to do. Create value, bring that value to the marketplace. What they don't realize is that the taking game overlays that. And that's what we see in the financialization of everything. It's not about what value do you bring. It's about who owns what.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about allocating who owns what so that I can dominate. And until we break that paradigm, going back to my big picture of competition and moving in the direction of creativity, we are going to continue to lose the money game. So the money game is just a component of my what's really going on, but it's a powerful component because for most people, it becomes tangible when you start talking about money.
Mm-hmm. So with what's really going on right now, it does feel that we are being socially engineered, for want of a way of putting it, to have certain views and certain perspectives. So then how do you strip that away as part of that self-learning, if you like, through the course or what you were doing?
First of all, so I'll take you through the modules of my course, if you will, just to give you how I've conceived of it. And I have a different layout in my in-person program. But initially, we start off with those challenges. So environmental upheaval, economic stratification, political polarization, technological disruption, and ultimately to those personal challenges. So first, are we on the same page that these things are happening? Most people will admit that, yes, these things are happening. They start then attaching, why are these things happening? And then we get into this area of what is human nature? And unfortunately, going back to my paradigm of might makes right, we are often driven by a paradigm that says fear, lack, limitation, and it becomes a worldview. If I believe the world is ultimately a dangerous place, then when I see you on the street, I'm going to be a little suspicious.
Yeah.
But if I accept that there is something bigger and broader and more loving behind this matrix of existence, then I'm going to be more open and accepting of you. Ultimately, we go through what is human nature? Why is fear so important to us? But ultimately, we have to overcome that fear. We have to change our worldview. Now, in my course, I talk about 3 different perspectives. So there's 8 billion of us on this planet. We have 8 billion different perspectives, but I reduce those into 3 worldviews or perspectives, categories of perspectives. One I would call the survivalist, and that's the person who's driven by what's happening physically around me. I don't necessarily believe there's anything outside of the physical. If I can't see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, feel it, then it's not real and doesn't exist. Those are what I would call the survivalists. And for them, this world is a competition. It is dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, kill or be killed, beat the competition, dominate the competition. If you have that worldview, I can't change your beliefs. You're going to believe whatever you want to believe. But just understand, if that's your worldview, then you are going to have a lifetime of competition. And it's always going to be competition and conquest. Competition and conquest. Might makes right. The second worldview says there's something bigger. There's something going on here that's bigger than me. And I label it as a theist worldview, that God has made us and has given us a purpose. And many in the theist worldview say we're here for a test. We're here to pass a test. And so that our whole lives become, I've got to follow whatever I think the rules are. And then my rules, and unfortunately, where that often leads to is my rules are the only rules that matter. Okay. And then soon enough, we fall back into that survivalist of we're competing against one another. And then I would say that third view is even a broader view that says this purpose to explore and experience, learn and grow, create and contribute, to express more life has a purpose to it, but you are the creator of your own reality. We are co-creating this adventure together. So where this brings us is, first you got to recognize your own worldview, and then are you open to expanding your worldview? If you are, ultimately what we want to get to, and this is something I still struggle with, ultimately you want to get rid of judgment and let go of fear. So you escape this lack, limitation, fear, and judgment paradigm, which is what we've been doing for 12,000 years of organized human society. We are at a transition point. We can actually move beyond that. But it's interesting. So I had this thought, and I know this is probably going a little further afield than you had thought about. But I thought, I think now, why are no leaders coming forth and telling us what is happening? They're all in this competition. We're going to beat each other. We're going to beat each other over the head. I'm going to win in trade. I'm going to win in the military. I'm going to destroy the other guys. Why? Because it's ultimately a personal choice. It's ultimately on each of us to make a decision on which way we want to go. Because we are the creators of this reality. You and I and everyone else, we make our own personal choices. We create this reality and how we interpret what we see, and then we expand that. And if we decide that it's all about competition and fear and lack and limitation, then that's what we're going to experience. If we decide it's about connection, cooperation, creativity, joy, peace, love, then that is what we are going to experience.
It's very, very deep there, Scott. It's there's so much you've covered, and as you were talking, I was thinking, I had these images kind of drawing up in my mind. Where you ended there around, so a couple of things that I immediately kind of take away from this, and I'm sure when I listen to this again, I'll take a huge amount more from it. Is you have a choice in how you react to the world around you. Whatever is happening has no meaning except the meaning you give to it. And there's a map of the world that we all carry in our heads, and it's up to you as to what color you make that map, whether you make it all gray and dark and dull, or you make it rich and colorful and vibrant. That's up to you, right? So that's what I've taken from what you've just said there.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
So I have a tradition in my podcast that I ask a previous guest to ask a question from my next guest. I've written it down because it's slightly long, so I will read it out. So my last guest said, when did you realize that you thought you were one way and then discovered that it was not who you thought you were?
It is, and I'll say the win is still. I'm still in process. Let's put it that way. I'm still in process because there's always a tendency for me, and I'll speak just for myself, to fall back to that old paradigm of this is what I get, and it's me against the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the more I realize, and this is, I have realized it, like even in this discussion, as I go back to how I got to Europe and how I got with the 3-star and how I got on Capitol Hill and how, so each of those things it was a thought and it was moving in the right directions, being open and allowing things to happen. So even today, I could still decide, okay, I've got to effort and I've got to work to make it happen. So that is falling back into what I say is a limiting paradigm, but it's still there. I haven't broken free completely of it. Don't know that I ever will, but that's what I aspire to break free of that lack limitation. I've got to effort. I've got to struggle. I've got to work hard. It is not about those things. It's about a vision and being open and embracing joy, embracing the fun of it all. And in that, things will align and fall into place. All is well. As long as I can remain in that place, all is well, embrace the joy of each moment, then everything will fall into place and it will turn out magnificently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the honest answer for me is there was no switch, but there has been a direction of letting go of that lack and limitation. And this body is me against the world. No, it is all of us together and we're all creating what we experience. And it can be so much more if we will allow it.
Yeah, that's very true. And I do think there's often not that switch, right? But it's a small step changes, and then you look back and you think, oh wow, how have I changed over that sort of time? And how do you bring the people around you along on this journey as well? Because you're letting go of things, but there's people around you who maybe aren't letting go of things. So how do you bring them on that journey?
Yes, that two parts to answer that question. So the challenge is you think, okay, I've got to help these other people see what I see. Really, no. Really, they're on their own journey and they're not necessarily going to see what you see, and that's okay. They're on their own journey. They'll find their own way in their due time. The however part, and I think the most powerful part, is you just be the light that helps light their way.
Right.
So you be that person that when everything else is crumbling, you are still the calm in the storm, with the idea that as dark as it looks right now, I'm going to light the light. And that's what you do. You bring the joy, you bring the peace, you bring that calm. And it's not about, even people will ask, of course, we raised 2 children and, how do you raise children? And it's not about making those children into something. It's about letting them become. And it's the same way with your friends and family. You're not going to change them. The whole task is about changing me. My task is to change me, not to change anybody else. So the more I can learn to be open and allow and accept and rejoice, then I become the light that helps other people take some of that shadow away, and they will find their own way. It's not me to change them, and it's not whatever the struggles they're in, it's not up to me to change that. It's for me to be the light, be the calm, be the peace, be the joy. And then in that way, they will see, hey, there is a better way. Maybe.
Yeah,
yes.
I love that sort of concept that, you be the light. So your values, everything, your beliefs, what you stand for is there. It's firm. It's something that they can look to and always have that almost guiding principle, right? The North Star, for one of a better
Yes.
way of putting it. Yeah, you are the North Star that's helping guide people around. So that's really fascinating. Do you have a question for my next guest, Scott?
The for let me frame it this way, as I hadn't wrote it down, but I had conceived of this idea, and maybe you can help me sort this question into a powerful question. But how can you know when you're being driven by fear or limitation or lack, or when you're letting go? How can you make that distinction between what's holding you back and what could potentially propel you forward?
Right.
I use that specific word how because that we oftentimes get absorbed by the how. I want to know the how, but
Yes.
I think that would be a useful question to ask someone.
Yeah, I think it is a very useful question. I think many of us don't really stop to think about it. And quite often, when I did a coaching course, my coach said to me, "What are you moving towards?" So I don't want to hear what you're moving away from. I want to hear what you're moving towards, and that's kind of encapsulates that piece, right? The fear piece that you have versus what you want to move to, and what
Yes.
you want to get to. So that's it's an interesting question. How did you have again, back to that sort of thing, did you have a moment where you recognized that you were the fear was guiding you more than the kind of direction that you wanted to go in?
Part of that, I think, for me, part of that is this sense of how I feel. So if I'm feeling anxious or fearful or things don't seem right, then it probably is I'm attaching to fear or lack or limitation. Now, that doesn't mean I don't feel those things. So I do. I'm trying to grow through that personally myself. But the key for me is first recognizing, why do I feel anxious? Why do I feel fearful? And then let myself feel that feeling, that emotion. Okay, I'm getting the signal through my body that something isn't right. And then I realize, oh, wait a minute. I'm in fear. I'm in lack. I'm in limitation. I've got to break free from that, let it go, which means I've got to experience it. I've got to let that energy out. Once that energy goes through, then I can refocus a little bit and say, all right, you're really telling me to take the step that's going to lead me outside my comfort zone. Do something that maybe I haven't done before. And that way I will grow, I will learn, I will move to a higher level, which is ultimately my ultimate objective.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, we're at the top of our time now. It's been a very fascinating conversation. We've gone all sorts of places with this. If people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Of course, as far as books, you can find my books. I'm online, mostly on Amazon and those kinds of places. I do have that new course, What's Really Going On, Apocalypse or Revolution, at udemy.com, or you could find it on YouTube if you look for What's Really Going On, Apocalypse or Revolution. For me personally, the platform, I kind of focused on LinkedIn. So if you were to come through LinkedIn, that is one of the easiest ways to get in touch with me directly. Is connect with me on LinkedIn, and by all means, let's start a conversation. And if I can help you in any way, I will do that.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Scott. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Well, Sanjay, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to engage.
To find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.